Sean Green, first and foremost, how are you feeling? How are the nerves? We're days away from Super Bowl 59. How are you doing?
It's a great question. I'm doing great because they're in the Super Bowl. This first week, I try to just enjoy the idea that they won, they're in the Super Bowl. And then next week, leading up to it is when I start getting nervous. But I'll be honest, I felt like kind of how I felt against the Commanders in the NFC Championship game, where I was nervous because it's the NFL and anything can happen. But I just kept looking at the matchups and how I thought the game would shake out, and I was not gonna, be like borderline cocky. I felt super confident going into that game, and now obviously it's the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. You can't be as confident, but as confident as you can be without spitting in the face of the gambling gods. That's the level I'm at. So I'm borderline cocky, but I feel really good about the team. And I rewatched Super Bowl 57 for the first time since watching it live because it was obviously super painful and didn't want to ever have to rewatch it. But I felt like if we're going to be talking about Super Bowl 59 for 2 weeks, I got to go back and rewatch it. I rewatched that game. Frustrating, but also optimistic because there's stuff that team didn't do and couldn't do that I feel so much better about this team around. And then I went back and watched the Super Bowl from the 2020 season where the Bucks beat the Chiefs, and there was a lot of stuff I liked that I saw there. So feeling pretty good is my long answer.
I do want to talk about that previous matchup in the Super Bowl a couple years ago because I do think there's an angle in that game that is very intriguing for Philly's side. And I'll get to that momentarily, but let's talk about last weekend. Like, was that NFC Championship game as good of a situation as you could have hoped for? Like, no football game is easy, but that was pretty much as easy as it gets. No injuries, so everybody is seemingly in good health. Jalen gets unleashed a little bit, finally has a solid looking box score that many were clamoring for. The 7 rushing touchdowns, one more than the
Crazy.
Cowboys had all season. Like, that was pretty ideal for Philly.
Yeah, and coming into the game, why I like the Eagles. One, like the defense. Now they did a great job creating turnovers, defensive side two, and then special teams got one. And again, they've been a team that constantly or consistently is winning the turnover battle. So felt really good about that. And then I felt really good about the situation on offense. I thought they weren't going to be able to, the Commanders weren't going to be able to stop the run. Saquon Barkley almost had a quiet game by his standards, which is crazy to say. Yeah, and then Jalen Hurts, who the passing game was firing on all cylinders. And I saw him kind of get it. He hadn't, I was more optimistic about him passing game wise and just like he was clearly managing. He's still kind of conservative, but there he was playing in rhythm. And when that passing game gets in rhythm, now some of it was maybe rust off the concussion, there was weather. You can make a lot of excuses, but it just wasn't operating at a high level. This was a great example of the passing game offense and then the defense. Like what I like about the defense, their ability to create turnovers. It was just awesome. So yeah, no, it's tough to have any like real negative notes of what I saw in the Eagles in that game.
Be honest with me now. Are you worried about the officiating in this game in Super Bowl 59? Do you buy into this Chiefs refs narrative we've now heard for years in the NFL?
Well, yes and no, right? So earlier in the season, I was like, it's so frustrating betting against this Chiefs team. When they get in the playoffs and they're at home, I'm going to just auto take them because if there's anything close, it breaks the Chiefs' way. And I think there's a couple things going on. One, a lot of these are in big leverage spots and a lot of them happen in Kansas City. So I think people are forgetting that part of home field advantage is you have the crowd on your side, which historically impacts referees. So let's just take a look at it like that. And yes, I think star teams get star calls to a certain degree. But even that Buffalo game, like Buffalo, uh, if you're the Buffalo Bills, like you can't be going out the refs there. Like you got to be able to make it so that the refs can't impact that game. Like you can't leave it up to the refs. If it's close, they might get the push. But our buddy at the NFL ref stats, the referees assigned to it, they brought in some guys that don't have any Kansas City bias, at least historically, and that the Eagles, so far, I think they're 2-0 straight up in ATS with this crew. So, and also, I think they lean towards offensive holding is like the one big penalty that they call, which I think is a setup for the Eagles. Well, because the Eagles O line, their issues are like the illegal man downfield. That's the one penalty that they always get tripped up on. But on the other side, again, why I like the Eagles is the Eagles D line against this KC offensive line. So I think they're going to generate some holding penalties and put them in some long spots.
Yeah, I think I saw this crew. The Chiefs are 3-1 since Patty Mahomes has been there when this crew has been on the field. And I mean, the Chiefs are going to have a good record no matter
Yeah,
what
against a
crew it
lot
is.
of, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, interesting notes there. Something that stood out a bit last week was Philly using Dallas Goedert on jet sweeps. Not something that we're used to seeing necessarily. Was that a case of Philly and Kellen Moore maybe expanding or opening up the playbook a little more, digging in deeper to the bag of tricks?
Yeah, it definitely was. And not only the Dallas Goddard running the ball, but the Devonta Smith pop pass, which is like for moments when the team has been struggling. Yeah, Devonta Smith, super athletic. Get him something super easy in space like that. And especially with Barkley and like the read option stuff where the defense has to play Hurts' rushing ability, it creates some great cutback stuff. So I think what they're using that for, you're going to see some maybe fakes off the Devonta Smith pop pass, maybe even a play action off a fake Goddard run. We'll see. I guess I'm not surprised if we see another Goddard run in the Super Bowl, but you know how these OCs work. They like to show you something to set up something later. So I like the creativity from Kellen Moore there. I thought it was one of his better called games. Some of that's the execution with Hurts, but I liked it. So hopefully they have more interesting stuff like that.
Speaking of Hurts, he's now become the 8th quarterback to play in 2 Super Bowls in his first 5 seasons. Pretty good company as well. Troy Aikman, Tom Brady, John Elway, Patrick Mahomes, Big Ben, Kurt Warner, Russell Wilson, and now Jalen Hurts. Where does this guy rank in the pantheon of Eagles quarterbacks, in your opinion? Is he up there with maybe the likes of Donovan McNabb? And if not, does winning the Super Bowl make this guy number one?
Yeah, I mean, if Jalen Hurts takes down Patrick Mahomes and they win the Super Bowl, he's automatically Eagles' best quarterback, and it's not even a discussion. Now, if he loses this game, which my brain can barely fathom that possibility, but I still think you could make a pretty good case for him because of what we've seen of these 4 years. And same with Sirianni. Like Sirianni right now, you could make a decent case best coach in Eagles history. Now, Peterson got the Super Bowl, and obviously that is huge, but getting the 2 Super Bowls in 3 years here, having multiple 14-win seasons, and yeah, it hasn't always been the prettiest with Jalen Hurts sometimes in the passing game, but he's added a ton in the running game and just not turning the ball over. Knowing that you have a good defense, knowing that you have a great running game, not turning the ball over. Like if Jalen Hurts doesn't turn the ball over, they win almost every single game. And even against this Chiefs team, he's going to have to play another clean game. So I think he deserves a ton of credit. It'll be interesting to see where his legacy shakes out. McNabb had a pretty good run. They got to a number of NFC championship games, only won one. He had a very good defense, obviously really good head coach in Reed. They just couldn't quite figure it out. Hopefully that's not the legacy here with Hurts. But I mean, if he takes out Patrick Mahomes and stops the three-peat, they might be building another statue there next to Doug Peterson. So it's really going to be big for his legacy.
The Super Bowl always brings in some new bettors, some first time bettors. For people out there that maybe hadn't watched the Philadelphia Eagles a ton this season, who is a player maybe a bit further down the depth chart that might be worth a sprinkle in something like anytime touchdown markets? Like we know Saquon will get his, we know AJ will factor in. Jalen Hurts, obviously a solid candidate to run one in. But is there anyone under the radar that could be a big factor at Super Bowl 59?
Yeah, and it does seem like he's already catching some steam here early on in these 2 weeks. But Dallas Goddard, he's been a big part of the offense, and it's really one of the Chiefs' weaknesses. You look at like most receptions, most yards allowed. Like Chiefs are high up there in the league, and I going back to that Buffalo game, I would have loved to see. I had a Dawson Knox anytime touchdown at like 7-1, and he got stopped right there at the 2 yard line. And Goddard, they've been drawing up a ton of stuff. They're going out of their way to get Goddard more involved in the offense. As you mentioned, they got him going in the running game. That to me is always a sign like, oh, okay, they're coming up with ways to get this guy the ball. So those are the type of guys I like to get ahead of and play some of their props. I think Goddard anytime touchdown is going to be a fun play. That'll definitely be on my card.
Let me ask you this. Is there a Super Bowl prop or a Super Bowl exotic prop that you bet every year? Like, is there something that you continuously bet during Super Bowl season? Like, are you betting coin toss every year? Are you betting Gatorade color every year?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's see. I do bet coin toss every year. Every year I bet heads. And a lot of times I'll just end up, yeah, of course you can say the super sharp thing of like, don't make sure you get minus 103 or two. Don't be paying juice on the coin toss. I did go down a rabbit hole of, whether a coin toss is truly a coin toss based on the weight of the coin. And yeah, I just love having the coin toss bet as a way to kick off the Super Bowl. I'm always going to be on heads, never on tails. So that's my lock for the exotic. Give me heads every single year. Public all over tails. That means there's some good opportunities on heads. That's funny because we're friends with the guys at the Circa, and I'll ask them, hey, what heads or tails? What are more? And people bet more on tails, but they never adjust the juice to heads. Like they're just we're not going to do it, but it's just funny to think that the public does love tails. So I like fading the public. Give me the heads here.
Another interesting tidbit I've learned about you. First, it was that you guys never bet totals, and now that you
Yeah.
always bet heads in the coin
Yes.
toss.
Yes,
Interesting
exactly.
insider information here. We alluded to it earlier, but obviously a rematch of the Super Bowl a couple years ago. But a big difference, at least for me, and I'm sure, for tons of other people, is Vic Fangio is now on the sideline here. The Eagles were obviously incredibly close in that previous Super Bowl matchup. Basically, say they're one stop away. Just how much of a difference has this man made to the Eagles compared to the last version of the Philadelphia Eagles we saw in the Super Bowl?
I said they might build a statue of Jalen outside the stadium if he wins, but honestly, it might be Vic Fangio because you ask Eagles fans, there's no debate about Vic Fangio. Some people like Sirianni, some don't. Some people have their issues with Hurts. Some people are all in. There is no. I mean, he could run for mayor of Philadelphia, and he does know how to spell Eagles, so that puts him ahead of the current mayor. But everyone's all in on Fangio. And I think it's just been this perfect combination of obviously Fangio and the scheme and whatever he's doing behind the scenes, but also the draft class and the talent they brought in. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, like we almost fixed our secondary completely in 1 year with drafting those two guys. Quinyon's I'm going to say it. He's one of the top 5 cornerbacks in the league, which sounds crazy for a rookie, but he's playing at that high of a level. Reed Blankenship. We got Zach Baun, basically a linebacker off the street, and he's a Defensive Player of the Year nominee. And then let's go to the defensive line. Jalen Carter having the best year of his career. Jordan Davis having his best year of his career. And then Nolan Smith, the guy who everyone wanted to call a bust last year, is now leading the playoffs in sacks. He has had a really great second half of the season. So some of it obviously is the players, but I mean there were a lot of guys that clearly the Fangio scheme, the coaching, whatever it is, he's getting the best out of it. And that's a real reason why I'm optimistic about this game.
I don't know if you remember, but after the draft last year, I messaged you. I said, "You guys got a good one in Quinyon Mitchell." I
Yes,
watched some of
yes.
the Mac. I watched some of the Mac last season. He looked like a stud. And even thinking back to that week 1 game, if you can remember all the way back, he looked like he belonged in the league at that point. There were a couple of
100%.
plays there where he looked like a rookie, but by and large, he looked elite even from week 1. So, what a great draft pick he turned out to be. Let's look at the X's and O's on the field of play on Super Bowl Sunday. What are some of the biggest mismatches on the field that maybe benefit the Philadelphia Eagles in this matchup with the Chiefs?
Yeah, I mean, look, on the offensive side, I think the Bills made the same mistake that the Lions did in their playoff losses of not sticking to the run. James Cook was had a nice yards per carry. Joe Mixon had a nice yards per carry. I don't think there's going to be any shortage of the Eagles continuing to pound the rock with Saquon Barkley. And I know it's easy to say, "Oh, Sean, they're going to load the box against Saquon Barkley and make Hurts beat them with the passing game." But every defensive coordinator has seen that same thing, and you can't really load the box against Saquon because when you load the box, that's how he hits you for those explosive 60-yard runs because he can get to that second level so quickly. So I think their commitment to the run and the way they play clean football, knock on wood, and don't turn it over, huge advantages on the offensive side. Now, on the defensive side, a real weakness for the Kansas City Chiefs has been their offensive line. They've had to move guys around. Luckily you have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Patrick Mahomes who can get the ball out really quick. You have Reed being able to scheme stuff up. So I really like our matchups. Like, that the guard Caliendo, who you might remember from the AFC Championship game that got pushed into Patrick Mahomes' lap. Like, if he's going to be having to go up against Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, I think that's really going to be tough. And if they're going to do what the Commanders did and was consistently double, triple teaming Carter on the inside, that creates great opportunities for Nolan Smith around the edge. Prop stuff. I think Nolan Smith to get a sack is pretty fun, but I like our matchup there. And then, cornerback wise, Quinion, I think they'll probably put him on Xavier Worthy, and I think it's going to be a long day for Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, I agree. Big physical cornerback there in that matchup could be really, really good come Sunday. Let me ask you this. For maybe prop bettors out there, who is poised to have a bigger game for Philly, AJ or Devonta Smith?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think they're going to play some man, and you saw that Hertz likes that deep ball, like on 4th and 5 that he hit to AJ going down that seam. So I think there is the chance that he could hit a couple of those, but now Devonta popped up on the injury report with a hamstring. I don't think it's super serious, but something to keep an eye on. But I would actually kind of look towards Devonta in this matchup. I think he had a very good game against them the last time they played. They like to use him on some of the slot stuff. I think he's a fun. I hit this on the NFC Championship game, the race to 20 receiving yards. He was the first one to do it. He had a 20-yard catch. It was like 4-1 in the conference championship game. I'm going to be running that back for the Super Bowl. I think it's even higher at like 5-1. They like to use him early. So that's kind of my favorite prop angle. I think maybe AJ might get, who's going to have more yards total is a little tougher, but I do like Devonta to get that first to 20. Also his longest catch over. It's either 19.5 or 20.5. I like that as well.
I kept watching. For some reason today, I got trapped in a wormhole of watching that catch that Devontae made against Jacksonville back in the
Oh,
day. Oh my God. It's just basically porn at this point. What a catch that was.
insane.
Last one I got for you here, and we ask everybody. It didn't go so good last week because we had a guy from Buffalo and we had a guy from Washington on the huddle last week. Well, let me get this one from you. What's your final score prediction?
32-23. Something random like that. I think maybe slightly over, but I feel as confident as you can be without upsetting the juju. As I mentioned, like the Eagles are going to use their same formula they've used all season. They're going to be able to run the ball against this Chiefs defense. They're going to be able to pressure Patrick Mahomes with that D line, and I like the secondary behind it. And as long as they play a clean game, which I think they can do, I think they can win the turnover battle, and I think ultimately they win the game. So Eagles get the win. Money line, let's go.
Most people out there in this space certainly are more than familiar with your work and your brand, but still, let us know where we can find all of your content and the great stuff that you do with SGP.
Well, appreciate that. Yes. Just type in Sports Gambling Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, you watch your podcasts. We're on YouTube. We also have a free app, the SGPN app. It's got all our picks and podcasts in there. So just type in Sports Gambling Podcast, SGPN in the App Store. Can't miss us. And appreciate you having me on, man.